Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Abdulwali Mohammed, CPA and real estate agent. I am pleased to present you a video presentation that I put together regarding the summary of the AMJA fatwa that was published back in 2014. This is a fatwa that anybody who comes to my office that is inquiring about Islamic financing that I provide, and I encourage them to read and understand the fatwa and the different types of Islamic financing companies in the US and have them make a decision. You're probably wondering why I am doing this. I'm doing this because there are lots of questions and lots of answers, but there is no enough answer in this area of mortgage services in the US. Therefore, I'm going to do the best I can to help you understand this fatwa. Please note that this is a long fatwa, and I highly encourage you, if you ever want to buy a house in America, for you to read this fatwa before you embark on your journey of buying a home. This fatwa was reviewed and published between the dates of September 15 to 17, 2014. Why is the date important? Well, we live in the United States, and fatwa can be a darura fatwa, and it can be revised. So please be aware of that. This fatwa was published by the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, abbreviation AMJA. And I am analyzing that fatwa and summarizing for you to the best of my ability. And if I miss something, I ask God to forgive me. My goal is just to educate my community about this area of Islamic financing. So let's get it going. Our agenda today will be: what is mortgage? What is interest? What is usury? What's riba? What does the Quran say about interest or usury? What is the process to obtaining a loan in America, whether it's through a conventional bank or Islamic financing? What were the resolutions of AMJA? We're gonna further discuss those companies that AMJA made resolution on. In general, those who avoid interest in their contracts. We're also gonna discuss the rulings with regards to the individual companies. And my favorite topic from my Muslim brothers and sisters: why does the Islamic financing companies sell their contracts to Fannie Mae or other institutions? And then we will conclude after that. Okay, what is mortgage? I'm sure you might have your own definition. It's an agreement between you, an individual, right? You're the you, and a lender that allows the individual to borrow money to purchase or refinance a home. It gives the lender the right to take individual's property if the individual fails to repay the money plus interest. What comes after that might be foreclosure or short sales, and that is another topic and does not apply to this presentation. What is interest? Well, it goes both ways, interest, right? Well, one is, it's an amount you as the individual pays to a borrower, right? Amount individual pays to borrow. You are the borrower from the borrowee, right? On the other hand, is an amount individual earns on savings. Think of the CD, right? The CD account or the savings account that's bearing interest on your bank account. You're probably receiving 4%, on your return on that. For this specific presentation, I'm going to focus on the amount an individual pays to borrow money, specifically mortgage. Generally, when money changes hands in the financial world, interest usually applies, right? Well, we cannot avoid the word usury when discussing interest. Why is that? Is probably the question you're asking. Well, maybe several hundred years ago, or maybe 1,000 years ago, the word interest might not have existed. If we talk about our three main religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, all of them forbid usury. What is usury? I will define that later on a different slide, right? But usury is an old way of charging money on money. Usury has been replaced by interest, which is the modern term of usury, in my opinion. Well, what is the definition of usury? I'm going to use the government definition, which is usury is the illegal action or practice of lending money at unreasonably high rates, right? Think of it this way, right? If your credit card company, their APR say 19.99, well, if they're going to charge you, say, 39.99, then that is really high, because the 19.99 is the legal rate, right? 39.99 is not. But let me come back to the mortgage, right? Say today's mortgage rate is 7%, but a lender, based on your poor credit history or your weak down payment, is charging you 21%. I know that is a lot, but I want to paint a picture in your head, right? That 21% is considered usury. Sometimes it can be considered predatory lending, right? So now you kind of understand the definition of what usury is. What is riba in Islam? It's an Arabic word used in Islamic law. It's a complicated word. And usually when we are referring to interest, we use the word riba. We don't use usury, right? If you think of riba, in your head, I was thinking, oh, I'm paying interest. That's the first thing you're thinking about, right? Well, the definition of a riba, it's a lot, right? Also, some hadiths have said there are about 63 different types of riba, right? And I'm going to actually share two here, but there are about 64 types of riba, right? Some sheikhs or ulama might even say late fees is a form of a riba. Administrative fee might be a form of a riba, right? Changing one good date for 3 poor dates might be form of a riba. I guess we can go on and on and on. But let's come back to the definition of a riba from Arabic standpoint. It can mean excess, increase, addition, growth, or an expense, right? When you take all these words synonymously, what you will probably conclude is that an additional thing, an extra thing on something else. And today's world is money, right? Additional money on money. In Islam, there are two key concepts of riba in Islam. They are riba al-fadl, which is the exchange of two different amounts of the same commodity. Think of the date I mentioned, right? One good date for 3 less quality dates, right? Then there is Riba al-Nasiya, which is interest on lent money. For example, I walk to a bank, I borrow $10,000. Well, I'm going to the bank because I need $10,000. I don't have $10,000. And the bank says, Abdulwali, I will lend you $10,000, but you have to pay me in a monthly installment over, say, 10 months. But I will need to collect from you $11,000. In order for me to give you this $10,000, I need $11,000 back. That means I have to make 11 payments, 10 months for the principal and 1 month for the interest, therefore $11,000. But in reality, I borrowed $10,000, but I paid back $11,000. Therefore, from the lender's standpoint of view, he has to make money on his money, right? Mortgage with interest is another riba al-nasiya, right? Paying principal with interest is a form of riba al-nasiya. What does the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words say about riba? Allah mentions in the Quran riba in many ways in the Quran. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I'm not a hafid al-Quran, but I have counted about 8 verses in the Quran that deal with riba. The most, or the one that's referenced the most, is in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second surah of the Quran. Ayahs between 275 to 280. Here is the translation of ayah number 275 and ayah number 278. Ayah number 275 says, "Those who consume interest will stand on judgment day like those driven to madness by Satan's touch. That is because they say," Allah is referring to mankind or the people who practice in commerce, right? Trade is no different than interest, is what the people are saying, right? But Allah says, Allah has permitted trading and forbidding interest. Whoever refrains after having received a warning from their Lord might keep their previous gains, and their case is left to Allah. As for those who persist, it is they who will be the residents of the fire. They will be there forever. Allah also says on ayah number 278, "O believers, fear Allah and give up outstanding interest if you are true believers." I remember listening to one of my favorite sheikhs, and he said, Allah is so just that on the day of judgment, if you have ignored the warnings of riba, that Allah might say, "Abdulwali, you have declared war on me in this dunya by consuming interest. Therefore, go ahead and choose any weapon you want to use against me and fight me. After all, for those of us who, consume interest, we have declared war on Allah. Allah is so just. He's giving you all the weapons you need to defend yourself." Subhanallah. Okay, guide to the home loan process. Every lender is different, obviously, but they all use the same process when they're qualifying you. For example, the folks that I work with that are trying to get a loan, typically, we ask them for their income, their tax return, their pay stub, 3 months worth of bank statement, and, obviously consent to hold their credit. All that is part of those 8 steps. But the most important thing for you as a person who wants to buy a home, whether you're going to go to the conventional side or the Islamic finance side that I'm going to discuss later, is you need to figure out what you can afford. You need to choose a lender and get pre-approved for the loan. You need to find a home and put on an offer. You need to finalize your choice as a mortgage lender. Submit the application. Obviously I mentioned about pulling your credit, right? you have to go through underwriting process. They need to know if you owe other debts and how is that debt going to impact what they call debt to income ratio, DTI, right? You need to also prepare your down payment and closing cost and obviously get your keys later. I want to emphasize two things here that some folks get confused. When you're getting a loan, there is two amounts you need to pay attention to. One amount is the purchase price. That's basically how much you qualify in total, including your down payment. There is also something called financing amount. That is the amount the bank is going to lend. So purchase price minus financing amount equals your down payment. So keep that in mind, please, okay? Those are two different numbers, purchasing price and a financing amount. Subtract those, it's your down payment, okay? By the way, this process is the same for both regular mortgage and the typical banks you know and the traditional Islamic financing companies that I will discuss later. Defining Islamic or Muslim mortgage. I want to disclose here and say the US government does not recognize any Sharia compliant transactions such as Islamic mortgage. However, there are Islamic financing companies. Okay, I'll repeat that again. The US government does not recognize Sharia compliant transactions such as Islamic mortgage, but there are Islamic financing companies. And those Islamic financing companies have two contracts. One contract is the Sharia compliance side, and one contract is to satisfy the US government regulations. And I'll discuss that later. There are several companies or banks that provide Islamic home financing. I will discuss that later. We need to distinguish Islamic mortgage versus Islamic home financing. There is no such thing as Islamic mortgage. There is Islamic home financing, which are banks or other institutions. Okay. Well, the bread and butter of this presentation, it is the fatwa that was put together by AMJA Fiqh Committee President Fatwa between September 15 to 17 of 2014 in order to issue a resolution concerning Islamic home financing in the US. Remember, Islamic home financing, not Islamic mortgage. The discussion, oh, sorry, I skipped that. Those Islamic financing companies submitted contracts or papers. Those papers or contracts were discussed with the participation of the representative of these relevant companies, Islamic financing companies. The discussion was followed by correspondence between the RFC, which is the Resident Fatwa Committee, and those companies with an attempt to clarify and respond to the Sharia issues that are present in their contracts, right? Some companies corrected those issues. Some companies have not. After the Resident Fatwa Committee reviewed all the contracts and all the papers, 3 resolutions were reached. They were: 1, companies that deal in Islamic home financing, the Halal mortgage, as I call it. Companies whose contracts in general avoid falling into explicit interest or riba. I call this Islamic financing companies with issues on the Sharia side, but there is no interest or riba in their contracts. And last, companies that deal in interest-based loans. I call them this a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? They want to use the terminology to confuse you, la riba, ijara, but in reality, they're mortgage brokers, right? They're mortgage brokers, and the ulama have said they are dealing in interest or riba like the traditional banks that you and me are familiar with. Okay, companies that deal in Islamic home financing. By the way, pay attention to the bottom of each slide. You're going to see, like the traffic light, you're going to see green, yellow, and red. Green means go, Yellow means caution. Red means stop, right? So I want you to be aware of this. Resolution 1 was companies that deal in Islamic home finance. These are companies that their contracts are in agreement with the Sharia. They're compliant. They do not sell their contracts to the government enterprises such as Freddie Mac. This is really very important, and I'm going to discuss that at the end of my presentation. They have the freedom to design their contracts in a manner in accord with the Sharia without facing any restrictions. Government-sponsored enterprises such as Freddie Mac, they don't have to draft 2 contracts. It's only 1 contract. And that contract is filed with the local county when the deed is being recorded. These companies, obviously, are quite limited, and they can only supply houses in tens as opposed to hundreds or thousands. Their availability is limited to certain states like California only. They might need members, or corporations or co-ops or associations. They're not able to truly fulfill the needs of the millions of Muslims who reside in America who wants to buy a home. Here's my green light. The ruling of the Resident Fatwa Committee is that it is 100% permissible to deal with and purchase homes from companies of this nature. But good luck, convincing Amin Housing to finance a home in Washington, Minnesota, Ohio, Texas, or some other places. Allah wa'alam if they have changed their model. The last time I checked, they were only doing California purchase homes. By the way, think of this as what you call in my language called musharaka. Sorry. I'm forgetting. Ayuto, right? We got a bunch of people get together, we put money in a pool, and I buy a home, and then you wait 5 years for you to buy a home. That's literally what it is, right? Here is, we're continuing the 3 resolutions. We already covered 1. Again, here's my yellow, meaning be cautious, okay? Companies whose contracts in general avoid falling into explicit interest or riba. These companies do not deal with interest-based loans according to the Fatwa Resident Committee. They deal in types of contracts that are permissible in the Sharia. They sell such contracts as murabbaha, which is cost plus purchase order, or musharaka, diminishing partnership, or co-ownership, ijara, rent to own. Well, Muslims like me have questioned the existence of these contracts. These contracts contain some forbidden components, such as invalid clauses, inequity on sharing certain expenses, such as maintenance, insurance, property tax, undue risk, unknown quantities, and the like. They invoke exemptions allowed by some jurists and resort to an improper mixing of different schools of jurisprudence to devise Sharia-based way out of the problem of interest. These companies are in need of selling their contracts to the federal institutions such as Freddie Mac to meet the large demands of the millions of Muslims right in America. I will discuss that toward the end of my presentation. The federal and the interest-based institutions, they put a number of restrictions on them that virtually prevent their contracts from being free of these Islamic violations. These violations, they differ in intensity from one company to another. So I highly encourage you to review the contract before you sign. Well, the ruling of the Resident Fatwa Committee is that there is an exemption to buy through them in the case of need or dire need, depending on the different intensities of violations and the fact that need must be dealt with according to its severity. Obviously, AMJA is not endorsing this. It encourages if someone can find an alternative and not deal with these companies, he or she will be safe and will be protecting his or her faith and his or her honor. What are the alternatives? Well, one is cash payment, right? If it's a cash payment, you don't need to view this presentation. Other one is owner financing. Well, tell me which owner is going to finance a home that's going to wait for you to pay off the home, say in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 25, or 30. Why will they do that? They don't like you. They want their money. It's not personal, right? They'd rather put that house on the market and close the house in 30 to 45 days and get their money. Why wait, right? That is really, I have only met 2 individuals in my community who were able to get owner financing. And alhamdulillah, God bless them for those. And I hope Allah gives us those types of sellers who can do owner financing, because we will not need this, obviously, right? The last resolution is companies that deal in interest-based loans. Remember my traffic light, green, yellow, red. These companies, their contracts are no more than offshoots of traditional interest-based loans. They are mortgage brokers. It's a form of impermissible legal device to get around the prohibition of interest. I call them wolf in sheep's clothing. The ruling of the Resident Fatwa Committee with respect to these types of companies is that you are not allowed to purchase homes through them. They are ijara loan and la riba. I'm sure there are many others I don't know, but these are the only 2 that the fatwa have referenced. We're going to continue discussing companies whose contracts in general avoid falling into explicit interest, riba. These are the ones who dominate this market, okay? I'm going to remind you again, the ruling of the Resident Fatwa Committee is that there is an exemption to buy through them in the case of a need or dire need, depending on the different intensities of violations and the fact that need must be dealt with according to the severity, right? So need or dire need is desired by individual society. AMJA leaves the determination of such need to the individuals interested in buying the house. This is why it's very, very important for you to do your research, read the fatwa, and make your own decision instead of having somebody else make a decision for you. This indicates that even though there is a general need that allows for using imperfect contracts, the individual situation is still a critical factor to decide the actual level of need. Again, AMJA encourages if someone can find an alternative and not deal with these companies. I want to give an example of what a need or dire need might be. Please note that I'm not here to give a fatwa, but just to paint a picture and give you an example. Assume the person watching this is a mother and a father, right? I'm Somali. Average family in the US, we have 5 to 7, right? Assume that family currently lives in an apartment, usually 3 or 4. You hardly see 4-bedroom apartments, but let's just say they have 3 rooms. Mom and dad live in 1 room and maybe with 2 little ones. You have 2 rooms left, and now you have to divide the 3 or the other 5, those 3, right? Well, the family have young kids. They have no yard. They have no place to, how should I put this way, extend themselves, right? They have neighbors. Some of the neighbors might not be friendly, right? There is ones above you. There is probably another neighbor, below you, right? There is neighbors to your side. They're playing loud music all the time. You don't control that, right? So if you're a family that size, will you actually be in the category of a need or dire need? Allahu a'lam, only you know. One can also argue that, hey, move out of the apartment and go find a house. Legitimate reason. You can do that. Well, the average rent for a 4-bedroom house in King County is $3,000 or more. Obviously, you have to look at the mortgage side, right? With today's rates, maybe the mortgage can be $4,000. But if you're a professional and you're capable of making the monthly payment, then you could fall on the need or the dire need. This is why it's very important for you to do your own research and make that decision. I'll share with you a story. I'm sorry I'm taking a little bit long here to explain, but I want my community to understand what I'm coming from. Individual sends me and says, Abdul, I want to buy a house, but I want you to make a promise. I want you to promise that this thing that I'm getting into is 100% Sharia compliant, no riba and stuff. I say, brother, wait, I say, that's not how I do work. That's not how I work. I bought a house 2 times and I made my own research and I made my own decision based on the fatwa and some ulama that I have consulted with. By the way, the ulamas are across the board. I remember about maybe, I would say 9 years ago, a rumor was Abdul was fatwa shopping, right? I was jumping from one sheikh to another sheikh to another sheikh. And I was getting, it's riba, don't do it. No, it's not riba. Well, we don't know about it, right? But when I did my research, I came to the conclusion that it was right for me and halal for me. Therefore, but my need might be different from your need. So please do your own research. Ruling with regards to the individual companies. Now we talked about, what's mortgage, what's interest, what is riba, what is usury. What did AMJA say about those companies? Well, who are these companies? They are 6 companies that AMJA reviewed. They are Ijara Loans, La Riba, Amin Housing, Devon Bank, Universal Islamic Financing, also known as UIF, and Guidance Residential Services. Ijara Loans and La Riba, 2 separate companies, but I put them together because the ruling of the committee is that it is not allowed to deal with this company as their model contains clear and explicit interest. If you're going to go with them, you might as well go to Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. You might get better rates. They are mortgage brokers. Amin Housing, my favorite. I wish Amin Housing was in Washington State. I will go with them 100%. By the way, I tried them and they say no. The ruling of the Resident Federal Committee is that no haram in dealing with this company. Their contracts are consistent with the laws of the Sharia. The Resident Federal Committee has no objection to their practice. They're permissible for Muslims to purchase homes through them. They're based on a diminishing partnership with rent-to-own, ending in ownership model in the relationship to the purchaser. Their contracts are not sold to the federal institutions such as Freddie Mac. They avoid explicit interest in their transactions. By the way, I have reviewed their contract and I also visited them in California. For example, if you were to say remodeling your house and that money you put into, first you have to let them know that money you put into the remodel is added to your equity. Alhamdulillah, right? So, and many things. So if you're interested, you live in California, please check Amin Housing. I'm not being paid for this, by the way. Devon Bank. Before we talk about what Devon Bank provides, let's talk about Devon Bank as a bank in general. It's a community bank. It's an independent bank in Chicago, like any other bank, except that it's small in nature when compared to other traditional banks. They have been offering faith-based financing since 2003. This word faith-based financing is really important because faith is not only to the Muslims, but also to another community that practices in Judaism. In the Judaism teachings, the there is something called ribas. And when I checked ribas, ribas is also usury. How ironic is that Hebrew and Arabic, two sister languages, the word riba and ribas have similarities, and they both define them as usury or any excess money on money. So Devon Bank offers what they call heter iska financing, which is designed to avoid conventional interest for people who practice in Judaism. So that's why it's faith-based financing. So they serve both the Jewish community and the Muslim community. Okay, universal Islamic financing. I want to give you also their background. By the way, Devon Bank and UIF, they sell the same product. So the next slide, I'm going to share with you what they sell. Universal Islamic financing is a subsidiary of a university bank. So UIF is owned by a bank, okay? So Universal Islamic financing, they're not a bank, they're a subsidiary of a bank, but they provide faith-based transactions. So a faith-based subsidiary of a university bank. Unlike Devon, Universal Bank does not mention Universal Islamic financing on their website. Well, Devon does that. Devon is a bank, also says, hey, we offer, Islamic financing or faith-based financing, where Universal Bank does not at all. That kind of rubbed me off, but hey, it's me. Devon Bank and Universal Islamic financing, the products they sell. They have two types of Islamic contracts, murabbaha and rent to own. What's a murabbaha? A murabbaha is basically a contract plus a purchase, cost plus purchase price, right? So think of it as I bought this highlighter for $10 and you want to buy it from me. And I say, well, it cost me $10, but I got to make money. I'm going to sell it to you for $12. But hey, pay me in 30 years. Well, the key here is that I purchased the highlighter first. So it's a murabbaha when I do that, right? When the AMJA committee was reviewing this contract, they say this contract is surrounded by doubts concerning whether the bank truly owns the property before it's ready for sale. Remember, I own the highlighter and now it's ready for sale. Well, the home that's a murabbaha that Devon Bank is going to sell to me is not available. I haven't done the research yet. I haven't identified the home yet. I have to go look for the home. And once I identify the house, I have to let Devon know the house that I'm buying. So the ulama, they had an issue with that, okay? They also said, contract also contains some defective or problematic conditions or aspects of great unfairness. The ruling of the resident finance, the resident fatwa committee is that there is no harm in dealing with this murabbaha contract of this company in the process of dire need. Please pay attention to need, dire need, face of need, okay? Rent to own is another type of a contract that Devon Bank and UIF sell. It contains a number of Sharia violations according to the Resident Fatwa Committee, including having two different contracts for sale and a lease, okay? The ruling of the RFC is that there is no harm in dealing with this rent-to-own contract when there is a state of dire need. So it's more severe, in my opinion, from dire need. Guidance residential services, background about them. Well, I discovered that Guidance Residential Services is not a standalone company by itself. It's actually owned by a subsidiary. Sorry, it's a subsidiary of a Guidance Financial Group. So a bigger company owns Guidance, just like UIF is owned by a bank, right? The difference is that Guidance is not owned by a bank, it's owned by a company, okay? So who is Guidance Financial Group? They are a company that creates investment products on a global basis to meet the needs of institutional investors. The key here is institutional investors. Who is that? I will answer that later. Guidance Financial Group specializes in developing private equity, real estate, and fixed income investment products for these investors. So who are the investors? The institutional investors, right? The big guys, as well as solutions for participants in the primary and secondary housing finances. So the word primary and secondary is also very important, and I'll discuss that later, okay? According to their website, Guidance Residential specializes in a Sharia-compliant home financing in the US, okay? Declining balance co-ownership program was created under the guidance of 7 globally renowned Sharia scholars and 18 US law firms to ensure it meets strict adherence to legal jurisprudence of the Islamic faith and conforms to US legal and regulatory requirements. Disclosure, by the way, I purchased a home through Guidance, and I also purchased a home through Devon, okay? I have not purchased a home in university Islamic financing. Now that we know who Guidance Residential is and who Guidance Financial Group is, let's discuss what does Guidance sell. Well, they provide musharaka. It's based on a diminishing partnership with rent to own, ending on an ownership model on the relationship to the purchaser. One thing that Guidance does is whenever they enter a contract with you, they also open an LLC that is a part owner of the home. And if you look at the Guidance statement, they do charge you about $19 to maintain and have the LLC be active until the loan is paid back or the musharaka is purchased by the homeowner 100%. According to the Resident Fatwa Committee, their contract is sound in general, but however, their contract contains in some Sharia violations with respect to maintenance, taxes, and insurance, as those expenses are not distributed in just manner according to the percent of ownership. Personally, it's my opinion, I disagree with the ulama in this category, and I want to explain a little bit more. And I'm not doing this because, you know, I'm giving Guidance to kudos, but when I did my own research, Guidance argument was, hey, we are an investor who is purchasing this property with you, 80-20. Yes, property tax have to be paid. Insurance has to be paid. Maintenance have to be paid. But as an investor, we're only investing with you the 80%. The property tax, you benefit that directly because property taxes pays for many social services, right? For example, the police, the firefighter, the parks, the library, and all the other levies. That does not benefit directly to Guidance. Therefore, the argument was, we're not going to do that, okay? Insurance, well, we have to protect both of our assets, right? And expenses, we leave it to you because if you remodel the home, that equity, we are giving that equity to you. We don't want that equity back from you. However, the committee did not buy this argument. I bought that argument. Allahu Alam, I don't know why. Representatives of this company were advised to review these defective portions of their contract. Until this day, they have not revised their contract. The ruling of the RFC is that it is permissible to deal with them in the face of a need. So remember, we talked about dire need, in the state of a need, and face of a need. So still, Guidance gets yellow. They don't get a green, right? Like Devon and Universal Islamic Bank. Okay, my favorite here, and many people spend so much time in here, and I'm hoping that from today on, that you'll understand why companies and banks sell their contracts to Fannie Mae and other government institutions. Well, first and foremost, it is normal in the mortgage industry. All the banks, all the mortgage brokers do this. However, the terms of the loan will not change. That is the key. This is why the Islamic financing companies have a separate contract with you, because the term of the loan will not change, right? is a thriving market for loans called secondary market, right? Fine print. When you are signing the contract, it might say the loan could be sold, right? The keyword is they might sold the loan, right? So banks and companies sell mortgages to have money lent to other borrowers. They don't want to wait, $600,000 for 30 years or $1 million for 30 years. They want to take that money and use it again, right? They want the government to wait that 30 years interest, right? Most of these companies are only making money on services, right? Loan origination fees and stuff. The interest or the profit is going to the government. It's not going to the bank because they're selling the contract after 30 or 60 days. They're selling to these mortgage investors, right? Remember I said Guidance Financial Group, they are investor. They're selling to another mortgage investor. The party that purchases mortgages from lenders, right? Typically government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Federal Housing Authority, United States Department of Agriculture, Veteran Affairs. All these are institutions that buy mortgages. Some sell loans to other financial institutions, but keep the servicing rights. So for example, Guidance might sell their loan to Freddie Mac, and it might have US Bank or Loan Doc service that. Now the question is, well, I'm confused now. What is the difference between a mortgage lender and a mortgage servicer? Well, let's go back to what is a mortgage, right? It's a lender. The lender is the bank or a company issued you the mortgage. In this case, UIF, Devan, or Guidance Residential. Services is the entity that handles your home loan payments after closing. So for example, if you have an escrow, you're paying for the principal, the interest/profit, the property tax, and insurance. So all of these services have to go to different places. So imagine I live in Washington State. There is probably 50 plus counties. So if Islamic financing company has homes in all these places, it's very hard for them to manage those services in different counties. Therefore, they hire a servicing company to do that. Sometimes these entities are the same, but other times your lender will direct you to a third-party company that handles loan servicing for them. Okay, we're on the last lap. Well, I shared a lot of information today. I really encourage you to do your own research. Read the fatwa. Evaluate your situation. Need versus want. Remember, mortgage transactions have been legalized by the US and very difficult to comply with Sharia, hence the two contracts. Remember, everything can be sold and bought as long as this is done according to the consent of the seller and the buyer. We call it meeting of the minds. Long as the Sharia does not forbid the item in question. I remind myself and to you that Allah has permitted trading and forbidding riba, usury. I'm not even going to use the other word at all. Final disclosure, I'm not affiliated with any of these companies. I am an independent CPA and a real estate agent who helps individuals sell and buy real estate. I can be reached at via email, or you can visit my website. Until we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.